Got it. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's so great to have you all in this amazing architect panel. Welcome. It would be great for the panel if you could each take a moment to introduce yourselves further and share your stories, especially about how you ended up in the Salesforce ecosystem as an architect. Nadina, would you like to start us off?
Sure. And how much time do I have?
Oh, the whole session's an hour. I know your bio's long. All of your bios are so long, so I'll leave it up to you. But the whole session's
Okay.
ends at 4.
Yeah, so let me share a little bit about my journey. It's a very interesting journey. So the way I started in Salesforce, I was doing my master's program in computational science. And quite frankly, I had two choices, do a thesis or do an internship. I did not want to write another paper. I just finished my bachelor's and did my capstone project. And so I did this internship with a small ISV at the time that was using Salesforce. So that's how I started my journey as a developer. It was a very interesting time because it was very much a startup environment, but at the same time, I learned a lot about Salesforce in a very quick time and space, so to speak. As I went through my journey, I figured out really quickly that although I love development, I really like solving big enterprise problems. And so I naturally started going towards architecture. I didn't have a name for it then. It was just more of who are the folks that are solving the big problems in Salesforce? What is that persona? At the time, I wasn't very focused on, okay, there's the admin side of the platform, the developer side of the platform. I always saw the platform as one whole, and whichever area you entered on, you should try and learn the whole platform. So I always see it as a puzzle. What are the ways that I can push Salesforce to the limits so that I can understand the bounds and what is the best practices? And I essentially just, as I went through and I went to different companies, some were more enterprise companies, small business, different areas. What I really focused on was honing my Salesforce skills, and eventually I got a role as an architect, and eventually I decided in 2020 to start my CTA journey with a lot of energy and a lot of oomph, so to speak. The journey was long. I finished in 2023. There were highs and lows, and I can go in more of it, but a lot of my journey, I will say it's more about resilience and perseverance. On the days when people tell you like, yeah, this is a very exciting journey, those are not the days that get you through. It's really focusing on your why, focusing on why you're doing it, and remembering that it's meant to be a journey. It's not meant to be fast or slow. Some people finish in a year, some people finish in 4. It doesn't matter, right? It's really more about you as a person and what you're learning and evolving. In terms of all the things I do a lot of things in the Salesforce ecosystem. I'm a naturally curious person. I'm not going to go through the resume. I'll just say if it's happening, I've probably been involved in some form of fashion, because I typically like to give constructive feedback. And I typically like to understand what's going on in the community and really look at it from like a strategic lens. And now that I'm working as an enterprise architect, I look at other systems besides Salesforce, but still my focus is on CRM and CRM transformation. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about my journey.
Amazing. Stephen, could you tell us a little bit more about your Salesforce journey as an architect?
Sure. Yeah, sure. My Salesforce journey started in, I guess it was 2011. I was a business analyst writing VBA code for a hospital system when my girlfriend at the time invited me to a technical conference in San Francisco. I was like, well, I like the girl, and San Francisco sounds fun. So I hopped on a plane, I flew up to San Francisco, and when I landed, I was in the middle of Dreamforce, having no idea what Salesforce was. So this was a time when Dreamforce was a weekend. You can get an Expo pass for free. So I had my Expo pass and I walked around Dreamforce and I talked to vendors for a week, trying to figure out what Salesforce was. And while I was there, I met with the CEO of a small consulting company, and he let me come along and work on small projects on nights and weekends to learn Salesforce. So fast forward some years later, I ended up taking a an admin role, doing the implementation for the YMCA. From there, I moved on to consulting positions, until I eventually got to Cognizant, and they hired me as a senior solution architect, designing solutions for government partners and sports clients. And so I did that for a couple of years before I got hired on at Ticketmaster as their solution architect.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. And you, Susannah?
Yeah, so I love hearing both of your stories. For me, I'll start, since we talked about Dreamforce, I'll start with Dreamforce. My first Dreamforce was 2012. It's a little while ago. And I didn't study IT or anything like that in school. And I studied music. And my first exposure to Salesforce was when I started working at a nonprofit. I sort of like went from like being in arts and culture and then working at like an orchestra, and then slowly like ended up at lots of different nonprofits. And eventually I worked at one where they used Salesforce. And it was like back in the day, it was like before Trailhead, and it was like before Lightning, but I still really loved it. I was just like, I enjoyed figuring it out and like reporting and like all these things. And because nonprofits, I don't know, they used to get like a crazy discount for Dreamforce, and it was like a week. So like our entire team, we had like a little like technology and operations team of folks, and we all went to San Francisco and all went to Dreamforce. And it was like, again, coming from like a small nonprofit, it was like, what is this like crazy conference? And there's just like so much to learn, and I loved it. And fast forward a bunch of years, and I worked at nonprofits for a while, like doing little bits of Salesforce, but eventually switched to 100% like Salesforce focused role at a for-profit company, which was a bit of a shift. But there I started as a business analyst. I think I got hired as a senior business analyst, and then was a technical lead for a while, so managing some devs and admins. And eventually I was on a team where there were technical architects that were like essentially like leading all of the team of tech leads. And I was like, I want to do that. So I, learned from folks on my team. And around that same time was when they launched the boot camps, the architect boot camps that I launched at one of the TDXs. Like, I don't remember what year, but that timing worked out really well for when I just got that job as an architect. And I was like, well, I want to go to this to like up, sort of like get on the right path. And I heard all about all of the certifications and CTA at that time. And I was, there's a group called Ladies Be Architects online that was started by a woman named Gemma Blizzard. And like we were all sort of like on that crazy journey around the same time. And yeah, just like really into becoming a Salesforce architect. I actually never went for the boards. So I think that's like there's like so many different paths. And I think we're going to talk about that this morning. Like you don't need to be a CTA to be an architect, but there's like lots of different paths depending on what your role is. I really fell in love with the sort of like evangelizing part of the role. So with my work for Ladies Be Architects, I talked at a lot of different conferences and like was really involved with the community, was doing that for a while, and then got sort of reached out to by Salesforce because they were hiring someone to do that role full time. Like I was doing it like nights and weekends and working at my company as an architect. And pivoted into doing evangelism for architects full time. And now I am a product manager at Salesforce. That's my journey.
Amazing. And speaking of CTA, Nadina, not only are you amazingly a Salesforce CTA, a certified technical architect, but you were the very first Black female Salesforce CTA. So for those that don't know, can you share what a CTA is? And I know you spoke a little bit about your journey too, but could you give a little more detail about your journey to that amazing achievement?
Yeah, the way how I see a certified technical architect, I see them as a trusted advisor, right? In terms of when you're in the room, when you're advising either your customer or in my case, I work directly for a customer. You're that person with the technical depth, the business acumen. You can talk to all lines of the business, whether it's the C-levels or the developer, you have that deep technical understanding. So that's how I see CTAs. When it comes to being the first Black female CTA, I tell people I didn't know I was the first one, right? When I first started this journey, the CTA is very mysterious. So unless like you know CTAs directly, it's really hard to be like, oh yeah, that person's a CTA or this person's a CTA. And I remember starting the journey, I really wanted to be that technical expert. I wanted that initial trust, because when people hear CTA, they hear this initial trust that like, oh, this person really has the technical depth and breadth of an implementation. They've done it all, they've seen all the things, and they can really articulate whether it's to your executives or the developers or anyone. And so for me, when I started my journey, like I was saying, in 2020, it was really one of those like things that kind of just popped up. It was, I really want to become a CTA. I had like a whole post-it note of things that I had written down. Back then, it's interesting because this video doesn't exist today, but I saw Carl Brundage, he did a video, and it used to be on the Architect website, but it was about when he did CTA. And first of all, it was so cool how he did it, because normally when you're prepping for CTA, you would typically have time to prep, and then you have that presentation you give. He did everything in one go. So as he was presenting, he drew out all his different artifacts. It's not something that you do. It's not something you have to do for CTA, but I just thought like how amazing this was, that you spent the time, you read, you understood this blind RFP essentially of a company that you'd never heard of. And then you could articulate that back in 45 minutes so eloquently. And initially I was kind of nervous because I was like, well, if this is what CTAs have to do, I have a lot of work I need to do. I soon learned that is not the standard. And really when it comes to being a CTA, or when you're studying to be a CTA, I like to see it as a couple of things, right? It's a transformation journey that you're on. And then it's really about being curious, because as you learn, you realize you don't know what you don't know. And so typically when people tell you like, oh, you should know this, you should know that, sometimes you might get nervous or afraid because it's like, oh, I need to be prepared for the judges. They could ask me any question. But I tell people with my board days, so I went to the board 3 times. My first time was in February, I didn't pass. My second time was in June, I got a partial. And then my third time was a 2-section retake where I did it in person. But every one of my board days, it was the best day ever, because it was my day. It was my day to show my technical breadth and to show these judges that like, I know what I'm talking about. This is my day. And it was something that I really prided myself in my journey, because I know a lot of people, when they would go to their board day, they would be nervous on, oh, the judge might ask me a tough question or I might not be able to answer it. Whereas for me, I was just like, whatever you want to ask me, I'm ready. I'm like super excited because this is the day I've been prepping for. And one of the things, as I started to do my journey very early on in 2020, I hadn't finished my prerequisites yet. I had just gotten the idea and I said, okay, I want to do this. I figured out what I needed to do. I started doing my prerequisites. I think I still had identity, and I think it was the development architecture exam to finish. Once I finished those prerequisites, I realized between now and then, I'm not ready for the boards. I really need to get some training. So I had a mentor at the time, because that was the thing you did. Once you, at the time, you would have another CTA mentor you. And I had a mentor at the time, Lawrence Newcomb, who out of the blue agreed to mentor me, which it was kind of crazy because we didn't know each other. I literally had put it out on the architect community. Hey, I submitted my case. I need a mentor. And he's like, yeah, let's have a call. Let's have a chat. And Lawrence was British. And I thought like, oh, I'm British too. So this is working out. And then I did some social stalking, so to speak. And I saw that he got his certificate on March 5th. And that was my birthday. So I saw all of this as a sign. And so as he was mentoring me, I figured out really quick, like, yes, his mentorship was very valuable and he stayed with me throughout my entire journey. But I really needed like some training with other folks and other like-minded folks. So I enrolled in Flow Republic at the time. And what really helped me there, I would say, is the group structure. Because for my group, it was 6 of us. We were all going for the boards. We had never went. And to this day, I think that's what really helped propel me in my journey, is the way how we learned information. We spent a lot of time going wide instead of just going horizontal. And so we would question each other, debate each other, and we had like this strict cadence. We basically became family. Every day at 12 o'clock, we would meet and debate. And like, when I tell you debate, I mean, like, everybody was in a hot seat. No topic was left undone. So security, governance, everything. Like, we were looking for each other weak points. And then we would go out to other groups. I would say we'd go battle, come back, and then battle again, because we used to get so passionate. So we'd spend every day studying. And then on the weekends, we'd spend 3 hours. And some people were in Canada, some people were in Pacific time. And we had a schedule. So some of us would get up early at 5. We'd do our mocks together. We'd grill each other. In the summertime, we decided that, okay, we want to spend some time with our family. So we'd start even earlier so that we could allocate that time. And a lot of it was more about how can we get the knowledge so that we're prepared. We didn't want to not have the knowledge. So we were essentially building mental models. So at the end of the day, when it came to the answer, we would know why it was the answer, but we had a clear logical path. So sometimes, as you know, people are studying, you might use other study sheets, but then you don't know the why behind it. And because we knew the why behind it, we could better articulate it, even if we didn't get the full answer. So did Flow Republic. November, I had my 601 evaluation. At that point, I was burnt out. I really was at kind of the precipice of, if I don't pass my evaluation, I have to wait 6 months. But I think that would be okay because I was kind of exhausted. And then I ended up passing, which was good. But then I realized, okay, now I have to be board ready in 4 months. And so that means I need to spend another Christmas studying, another Christmas drawing diagrams. And I got really intense in my CTA journey in 2021. It was so bad that I couldn't watch TV at certain points because I could just think about identity flows. And I could only think about, oh, this auto process isn't working properly. Or I'd go and like buy something. It's like, oh, they didn't link it up properly because they didn't have the correct IDs. And it was like the strangest time in my life. I was dissecting every single thing and I could only see it through the Salesforce lens. So that would bring me up to February, where I was super excited, went to do my journey. And let me tell you, after that journey, if anybody had asked me, and people was like, oh yeah, 100%, I feel super good about this journey. And then I didn't pass. And I was really shocked with myself. I was really shocked because I couldn't understand, did I not have enough preparation? Where did I fall down? And at that point, like, whenever you're gearing up towards it, you don't know what you don't know until your first board. And then once you've done your first board, 2 things happen. Either you pass and it's great. And then sometimes you'll ask people who've passed on the first time, do you know why you passed? Sometimes they can articulate like, yeah, I studied a lot, but like, do you really know why? Like, what was the crux in why you passed? And most of the times they can't answer. And for me, I thought, everything went well. And then you get that feedback. I can't say and talk about my feedback because of my NDA, but let's just say when you see all those lines coming through, I was like, oh my gosh, did I do this bad? And then I had a conversation with Suzanne Ferguson. So she's the head of the program. And after I had that conversation, I was like, oh, I actually didn't do that bad. For me, I felt like I was right there, but I just didn't get over it. So then I had to decide, okay, it's 2022. Do I take a break? And I was like, no, let's go again. So in June, I was able to get a date. I literally told Suzanne, whenever there's an opening, I will be ready. Just send me a date. I got a date in June and I went again. I was kind of a little worried because, again, I had a really great board date. And I was like, oh, I need to stop telling people I have a great day because is this like a repeat of what is happening? And I remember doing that exam and I said, if I fail, I would know why, because I was very strategic on that exam because I knew what I knew then. And I knew I had made some adjustments. So I've made some adjustments in my communication style, the way how I articulated information, and also the way how I wrote information down so that it could be clearly articulated to the judges, even if I wasn't there, right? So even if they looked at it, I didn't need to be there to explain it. And when I got the partial pass, I mean, I laughed actually, because I was like, oh, Salesforce must really like to see me present, because here we go again. And that June, I made a very big change. At that time, like I tell people, that's my transformation summer, because I did all the things people would tell you not to do during your CTA journey. So people would typically say, hey, don't change jobs because you need stability. I changed jobs. Hey, don't move across the country. I moved across the country because at the time, I really realized that, you know, up in June, I had made CTA my whole life for 2 years. And then I got this partial pass. Between my June and November take, the only thing that I did different there was I went in person one. But in terms of my preparation, it was still the same amount of preparation, but I had taken away the things that were causing me torment in my life. So at the time, my job, it was not working out. I should have changed before, but I didn't want to because I wanted stability. So I said, you know what? I have a partial pass. I'm changing jobs. I wanted to move. This was, you know, height of after kind of the pandemic was done, but I had also had like a lot of anxiety going on at that time, and Texas was just not the home for me. So I told my husband, hey, we have to move. I need some green grass. I need some fresh air. Like I grew up on an island, right? So for me, living in the city, it was not the life I was trying to live for all these times. So I was trying to get back to nature. So we moved, and that summer was like one of the most best and intense summers of my life, because I remember when I was moving, I had a whole CTA box. My whole CTA journey fit in a box. And I was so worried about that box that we moved it ourselves. So I did not let the movers move it. In fact, when I went to go do my board in November, I hadn't even finished unpacking our house yet. I had just enough to go do my journey, because at that point, CTA was the most important thing, but it wasn't the only thing. And being able to start a new job, having that fresh perspective, when I went in person, I was like, this is how I'd always imagined doing my journey, is doing it in person. So it was a full circle moment to now actually go in person. And some people would say, why go in person? Because now you can see the judges, like you're in the room. But for me, just being in that room with them, because again, it was my day. It wasn't about the judges. It was really about me and how I performed. So it was like the best thing ever. It's like I could read the personalities. I could, even though as I was doing Q&A, I tell people like I'm screaming out in my mind, but the way I'm answering is very cool, calm, and collected. But in my mind, I'm screaming out because I'm like, I have to take them on this journey. I need to explain, but not too much. But let me see what kind of questions they're asking. Are they asking because it's a knowledge check? Are they asking because I missed a word? And so there's a lot going on in that day. And I remember when I got my results, it was like middle, kind of close to December, like the end of November. And I had family visiting. And the first thing, it was in the evening. So I was like, oh, I passed. Am I done? Because I wasn't sure. So I had to have my husband read it. And then I was like, all I have is this email. So if this email disappears, then did I actually pass, right? So I like legit printed down the email just in case until my certificate reached. And then I was like, do I wake people up? Do I tell people in the morning? And so I kind of went back and forth, and I was like, no, I'm just going to tell everybody. So I just started messaging people left, right, and center. Like it was late in the night. And so by the next morning, I typed up like this whole thing for my company so that they understood, because, you know, some people knew what a Salesforce CTA was, but again, I know this was going to my executive. So I told them a little bit about my journey, what a Salesforce CTA is. We were doing a big transformation project at the time, so it all worked out. But the thing that I always go back to in my journey is that it was a lot of transformation for me. I was kind of burnt out at the end. So at the end of my journey, I think people were like, Nadina, you're very relaxed, but I knew what I didn't know. And at the time, it didn't matter if I knew it or not, because as a trusted advisor, you're not going to know every single thing. It comes down to the assumptions that you make, and assumptions can change. And so if you have that agility to pivot, but pivot correctly so you're not overcorrecting, then that's really what makes you a CTA. And so for me, as I was doing my exam and doing this and like summarizing my entire journey, I no longer was worried if I could answer a question or not. It was really more about taking the judges on, here's how I see this solution. Here are the assumptions I made. Challenge them or not, but this is how we're going to roll out this program. And this is the most optimal way to do it. And if it's wrong, then we can make changes. And so it was very much a conversation.
Wow. I knew you were a CTA, Nadina, but I didn't know all that just history and details and repeated attempts, and what an amazing journey. And you moved and all the things in the midst of that. So amazing. Congratulations. And I know it's not the same thing, but a lot of people I think that are new to this ecosystem think that you can pass, it's common to pass these certification exams like on the first time, and they get very down on the fact that they don't. And this is a great, right? I mean, obviously CTA is a little different, but I'm like, no, they're hard for a reason. Like, you just have to keep trying, right? You have to keep going. So thank you so much, Nadina.
You really have to just be resilient.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing journey to CTA.
You're welcome.
And I know that you all represent, and that there are different types of architects. And so Stephen, as a solution architect, could you explain like a day in the life of Stephen, and then also how that differs from a technical architect like Nadina?
Sure. So honestly, like my days start off with me just reviewing JIRA tickets from the night before that my BAs have created, making notes on them, making sure that they go out and they're getting the correct information, so that when I give that story to my developers, they can just take it and run with it. From there, I typically attend a stand up with the entire team, with the business analysts and project managers, seeing where everything is at in the pipeline. After that meeting, I meet with all of my developers, so that we can talk through what we're working on today, what classes are we touching, what flows are we touching, so that we make sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes. From there, it's reviewing more tickets and having more meetings with my business partners, so that I understand their needs, and making sure that the things that they want the system to do, that we actually get stories for them. How my job, it kind of differs from a technical architect. For the most part, my technical architect at Ticketmaster, he's doing the high level design of things. He's making sure that what we're building in one part of the system, it's not going to affect something else in another part of the system. For me, I'm taking as a solution architect, I'm taking a narrower view. So I'm taking like one piece of the puzzle, and I'm going in and I'm designing a solution for this.
Amazing. And aside from technical and solution architect, and this is to anybody on the panel, are there other types of architects that we're not covering, just so everyone knows the different types?
Yeah, so every company like has their own, like there's not a standard set of, like, solution architect and technical architect can mean like drastically different things at different places. So there's not a standard. It really is like, you do need to look at the job description. Even at Salesforce, like in some departments, technical architect means one thing, and in others it means something else. So there's a lot of differentiation even between those two titles, but then there's lots of other titles. Like enterprise architect is pretty standard across the industry. There's data architects, integration architects, techno-functional architects. There's like tons of others, and it all sort of is company to company.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of a techno-functional architect. What is that?
It's like a cross between a technical and a functional architect. And don't ask me what a functional architect is, because Maybe someone else knows, but I know lots of people have the title of functional architect.
They're business architects as well, which sometimes fit in that technical functional role.
Ask Brian Shea if you don't know him, like a person to follow on the internet. I feel like he's a functional architect.
Interesting. Susannah, I know you were previously in an architect role at both a client and an ISV before officially joining the Salesforce Well-Architected team. Can you explain what that transition was like and how those roles differ?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a previous life, I was, so sort of like Stephen and Nadina, working directly for a customer and helping them build what they need on the Salesforce platform. Moving to Salesforce, I think for me, especially as a community, so I was, really active in the community. I was an MVP. So I think that was hard, like sort of just going from a customer to working at Salesforce. So just like logistically, if anyone is curious about that process, I'm happy to share. Like it was a bit of a mind shift, like, okay, well now I'm thinking not just about my company, I'm thinking about customer architects and partner architects, and then also internal folks, because there's tons of jobs at Salesforce that are internal architects, not folks that are, well, there's like three types really. There's the architects who are, like partner ISV type architects. There's people in professional services who are working alongside folks like Nadina and Stephen, and I'm sure some of you, folks from our professional services team. There's pre-sales architects at Salesforce who help make sure that like folks understand how the pieces need to fit together before they make a purchasing decision. And then of course we have our engineering architects who we don't serve so much because they're building on a different stack, right? They're the folks who actually build what other people build on top of when they customize Salesforce. So there's like lots of different audiences, I guess, that opened up when I joined Salesforce that I hadn't really thought about before. And our team serves most of them, except for right now we work with our engineering team. My team's actually embedded in engineering now, so that we can work with them to build in the guidance and things that we're doing with Well-Architected into the product itself. So we're not necessarily giving them guidance, but we're working with them to bring the guidance to folks who build on top of Salesforce.
Oh, interesting. So having been in both of all those roles, Susannah, is there a preference or is it, apples to oranges?
It's apples to oranges. I'm really liking where I am right now. I think it took it was like a mind shift to get here. Like the depth of, I would say like I'm a lot more broad now than I used to be when I was in a delivery role. Because like in a delivery role, it's like you need to know all the like bits and like you need to know the nuance of the product because you're actually like helping someone that's going to use stuff, live for a customer. And you're like really deep on your individual, like Stephen knows everything about Ticketmaster, right? Like so deep on the nuance of what's going on there. So now I'm less deep with an individual customer, or even a set of customers. I'm more broad and more forward looking, which I think is the most interesting part. I spend a lot of time working with teams to understand what's coming. So like what's not yet live, what is like coming in the next like 3 to 4 releases, and how do we shape guidance around what's coming? So that's really what I find, I guess, the most interesting about my current role. It's
so interesting to have that background perspective that you had before from the customer side to then take it to Salesforce. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Susannah. I did want to, if for those that don't know, Girls in Tech announced that they will be shutting their doors today. This is the second organization supporting women in tech. Women in Code also shut their doors recently. So it's sad to see that these organizations supporting women in diversity in tech are closing down. So just to anybody on the panel, what are some things we can do as a community to help bring more diversity into the architect space?
Well, I can say you have to be the change that you want to see. So it's actually going out there. So when, God, what was it? It was 2020 2017 or 2018, my wife and I, we started driving down to a college to actually teach Salesforce to people, because when you're 18 years old, like you have no idea what Salesforce is. You know what Google at the time you had no idea what Salesforce was. You knew what Google was. You knew what Microsoft was. So it's showing them that there is another path. So just putting yourself out there, and also it's like it's one of the reasons why I love the Well-Architected program, because you have these bite-sized sessions that you're able to take out to your user groups. You're able to take out to a class to give people these exercises and show them this is what an architect does. It's about ingraining that thought process in them.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Steve.
piggybacking on Stephen, I definitely think when it comes to being that representation, being a change maker, you have to be out there to help folks, but then also helping folks help themselves. So sometimes people don't know where to go. They don't know where to get best practices. A lot of times when you're in companies, you might think it's something small when a junior or associate asks you a question, but for them, that might have been the biggest question that they could ask to come to you. Because even at my company, I still will take the time, if I'm on a call, if a developer has a question and they truly don't know, to reach out to them to say, did you think about it this way? Just to help them have that same perspective and the way that I'm thinking about it, because maybe it didn't occur to them that, oh, we don't need to solve the problem this way, and to help them start getting that thinking together, right? So I think it's also, that's a big thing, helping people help themselves by giving them that perspective as well.
And I think reminding folks, just to piggyback on what both Nadina and Stephen said, I think it's important too not to assume that folks that do represent diverse backgrounds are going to solve it for everyone else. So it's everyone's problem and issue and challenge, and it's not solved yet. I think the problem is shifting a little bit, which in my perspective is why some of these organizations that started, 10 years ago with a particular mandate to solve, I don't know, COVID did weird things, and the way people are showing up at work and showing up in their communities has changed. So I think there's hopefully going to be a new crop of folks who are helping to move the progress towards solving these problems forward. But I don't think it's, it sucks that these organizations that were doing good work are shutting down, but I do think there's going to be a new wave of new leaders and folks who have new ideas that is coming. And I think we can all help support those new organizations and those new leaders. And everyone should be doing it, not just folks who come from traditionally diverse or underrepresented backgrounds.
Yes, exactly. Thank you all. And I know Nadina spoke. Thank you, Nadina, for sharing the challenges that you went through, just especially on your journey to CTA. For Susannah and Stephen, what were some of your major challenges during your architect journey, and how did you overcome them?
I'll jump in, because I think when we came up, everyone was sort of okay, I want to be a CTA because that's what you have to do if you want to be an architect. And so I went down that path with a lot of folks too, and did Flow Republic, and my journey sort of stopped during COVID, speaking of COVID, and during some job changes, because I wasn't doing delivery anymore so much. And I think that's and from just speaking with a lot of folks at Salesforce and all across the community too, it's there is no one path to be a successful architect or person working in the architect space, I guess, which is what I am now in Salesforce. So think about what is really going to help you in your career. That might be CTA, that might not be. So thinking about what is most valuable to you and how you want to spend your time and how you want to invest your energy. And I think that was hard for me. I was well, I thought I was going to do this, so I have to do it. But then I realized that wasn't really my priority anymore. I was this is not related to my job necessarily. Like, am I just doing it because I said online that I was going to do it? And, like, that's not a reason to spend, like, as Nadina said, like Christmases and New Year's, like focusing on something you're not really like invested in anymore. So I think for me it was like letting my career evolve as it or unfold as it is unfolding, and not like sticking to an idea that I had randomly, 5 years ago. So I think letting go and letting things shift was really hard. Like, oh, I worked so hard to be an MVP, or like MVP was like part of my, like identity for a little while. And it was like so much of like who I identified as a professional was in the Salesforce community. And then that was also shifting and that was also different. So I think making space for your career to take the twists and turns that it will take, and embracing that and not thinking that it's like going to be one direct path, and that is okay and good and exciting, was the hardest thing for me.
Yeah. Excuse me. Thank you so much for saying that, Susannah, because I feel like as a woman, when I came in pre-Trailhead all that time too, I felt there was a lot of pressure as a woman to want to be CTA because there were so few and you started hearing about it more. But yeah, like you, it takes over your life and you really do have to ask yourself, like, do I really want this, or is this what I think I want because everyone else is telling me what I want? So thank you for sharing that. And for you, Stephen, were there any challenges and how did you overcome them?
Well, my main challenge is, I mean, it was fear. Like really it was like, well, is going from one role to another. Is like, am I going to be good enough for this role? Am I going to be successful? But every time I had that fear, it was like, well, it was, for me, it was maybe I'm not the best at this role when I get into it, but at the end of the day, like, I knew that if I worked hard enough, then everything would be all right. So, because like I would get in, for me, it was like I knew that if I didn't have the answer, like I could find it or I could work my way through it. Like I remember I still get in trouble for this at home, where like I'll encounter a problem and I will sit there and I will work on it until I find the solution. So whether that's me sitting in front of my computer for 36 straight hours, like that's something that that's something that I do, because like it's not that my job is my identity, but I feel like if you do something, like you should do it well. So like the only thing I can say is like, yeah, have fear, but don't let the fear stop you. Like you can overcome it and you can work through it. Like there's not a problem that you can't work through.
Yeah,
And not everyone, like, and everyone, and I think like the big like aha, it wasn't a blocker, but like the big aha that Stephen is sort of getting at for me when I was starting to work as an architect with a customer was like the smartest people that like the people that you're like, oh my God, they know everything, like because they're a CTA or they're a whatever. There's stuff that that they don't know, because like you're in a different place, right? And you have a different focus. And like even if you're starting out, like, and you're not an architect yet, like there's stuff that people who you think are like who are like brilliant don't know, because like no one can know everything, especially now. Like back in the day, I would say that too, but now it's like legit, like there's no one who can even know like even a specialty. Like there's going to be gaps because there's just so much information, and so things are changing faster, and it's like knowing how to find the answer is like half the battle.
Yeah, with the 150 different clouds now.
Yes.
Exactly.
A lot more complex than it used to be. Yeah. Marufa had a good question. I think this is a great parting question for our panel. What are your recommendations for a prospective architect to be successful and impactful architect? Nadina, do you want to start?
I would say as a architect, at least for me, I try to approach problems with curiosity. And there's not one way to solve the problem. There's multiple ways and multiple dimensions. And so the thing to really focus on is you might solve the problem like this today because this is what you know. But as you get better in your journey and as you learn more, then you would solve that problem a different way. So don't be afraid to look outside of where you're currently working, look outside of different industries so that you can have these different perspectives. Something that is applicable to one of the industries might be applicable in your org in a different way. And so even if you don't exactly know, hey, there's a feature, but you can still go and look and have, to Stephen and Susannah's point, have the ability to look, I think will make you a better architect. So don't be closed-minded, be really open to not knowing everything, but you can eventually solve the problem.
I can go
Susannah?
next. Yeah. So I have two, I'll give two answers, like one Salesforce answer and one just me answer. I guess the first one, the me answer, is don't be too creative. So like don't, like, no hacky stuff, right? That's like so tempting, especially like coming from like someone who, like me, who was like an admin and then a dev, and like you're used to like figuring out how to just like make something work. And like I remember being like, oh my gosh, I figured out this thing and it's like so creative and look how like neat this is that I did. It's like this like wacky solution that's like, I bet no one else did it this way. And I was like proud of that, right? Because there you are, you're like, I figured this out. And it's like so creative, you'll never believe it. As an architect, that's right, not like, that's not always such a good thing, because you want to build stuff that is going to last, that's going to scale, that's going to survive past you being at that place. Like you're trying to build stuff that like lasts. So the like more creative, the more like proud you are of how smart you are that you figured out how to do this thing, like the more suspicious you should be. Like, is that really the best solution? So like no hacky stuff, I would say. Like moving away from that should be your challenge, is if you're just shifting into the architect role. It's like, how are you going to build stuff that's like simple and that other people can build upon and use and manage? And then my my Salesforce answer is definitely check out the resources on architect.salesforce.com. That's the resource that I wish I had when I started my architect journey. So check that out, and I'll put the link in the chat.
Thank you, Susannah. You want to close this out, Stephen?
I mean, there's not much more to say after what those who have brought. I mean, only I can say is, I mean, just always want to learn more. Always want to be inquisitive. Like if you, when you're taking in more information, you're just adding more tools to your toolbox.
Wow, we ended right on time. Amazing. I would clap it up. Let's Zoom clap it up for amazing, inspiring panel. I got to figure out how to get those hearts going. Nadina, you'll have to show me. Thank you so much to Nadina Lisbon, Susannah Plaisted, and Stephen for joining us very late in their time, sharing their amazing architect knowledge and time with us. And hope this was recorded for folks that had to leave early and folks who weren't able to attend. So thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much again to Nadina, Susannah, and Stephen for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for organizing this.
Thank you for having us.
All.
Yes, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you for being here with us. Thank you so much. And I'll provide the recording once it's up. Thanks, everyone.